Hey guys, this is Todd with Laughing Ghost Studios, and I'm just going to jump right in here. So you'll see I've got the ear mostly worked out on the head in a very rough form, and what you're going to see in this video is me finishing it from this point on. So what this basically is you're kind of dropping in on a sculpting session where I knew I was going to be finishing the ear that night and decided to just turn on the cameras because why not? So one of these days I'll do a video of starting an ear from scratch and all the important points of controlling the overall shape of the ear. But this is just finishing. So you can see I'm scratching the back edge of the ear with a large rake and then rounding it out. And the reason I'm rounding it out mostly is because I used my own ears as an anatomical reference, and my ears are kind of like flat-ish on the back. I suppose they're kind of deformed a little bit, and from certain angles they look kind of like almost pointed, but that's not what I want this character to look like. I want this guy's ears to be, more or less normal looking. So I'm kind of rounding out the outer edge there. And then here I'm working on the area where it blends into the side of the head and where it sort of grows out of the side of the head. You want to definitely make sure you pay a lot of attention to that and really nail that. Otherwise it's just going to look kind of stuck on. So give that a significant amount of time to make it look natural, like it's growing out of the side of the head, and pay attention to how it blends in and how it kind of curves around and dips back down into the ear. That outer edge shape all the way from the lobe coming around and then back into the ear is a pretty complex curly Q shape there. So now of course I've sculpted the other ear already and finished it except for texture. So I'm kind of bound to making sure that they both look the same, and that's why I'm constantly checking symmetry. And I want them to look the same. When you're looking at it from the front, they should look like they're the same height and the earlobes are on the same plane and whatnot. But you don't have to be super concerned about that to the point where you obsess and kill yourself over it, because the people's ears are just different on both sides a little bit. And that goes for everything, even eyelids, nostrils. I mean, people's faces are just not 100% symmetrical on both sides. So you don't have to, try to achieve like, Egyptian sculpture of Ramses level of symmetry. But you should strive to get it as close as possible, because your natural sculpting will provide the asymmetry that you need, so you might as well go for as close as you can get it. Yeah, so right now I'm working on the earlobe, and that's another shape that you want to be very careful about how you're controlling it, because earlobes, as much as you might think that you know what an earlobe looks like, you'd be surprised when you look at your reference and see how much shape and form and how much character every different earlobe has. So you want to be super careful about how you connect it to the side of the head and how it flows up into the rest of the shape of the ear. And right there I'm checking the angle to make sure it's at the same angle. There are all these reference points that you can look up online about where the ears are supposed to be on the head. Like they start halfway from the front to the back, and that the top of the ear should be slightly angled back from the bottom of the ear. Those are just kind of guidelines that you can keep in mind and memorize while you're sculpting ears in general. And that goes for not just human characters, but even your creatures and your fantasy characters. It's good to keep some of those things in mind. It'll just help them look more real, more natural. Also, anatomical reference is huge. You want to have as much of that as you possibly can. So I've got tons and tons of pictures of ears. I've got pictures of my own ears, pictures of that I've taken of other people's ears. I've got life casts of ears. So you want to really just pile up as much ear reference as you possibly can and learn it and really study it and try to come at it as if you've never seen an ear before. Just try to put everything out of your mind about what you think an ear looks like and look at it from from the point of view of like you're some kind of an alien and you've never seen a human ear before, and you'll be surprised at how complex and weird this thing is. The landscape of an ear is just way out there. And imagine if the ear was like 6 feet tall and you had to control all those shapes. It wouldn't be something that you just kind of pinch out with your thumbs. It would you'd have to be very careful about every little curve and shape, and that's what you want to do when you're sculpting it in this size as well. So I've got this tiny little wooden tool. It's that one too is called a Kemper tool, and those are pretty common. You can get those at probably even Hobby Lobby. I think I got mine at a store where I'm from in South Bend called United Art and Education. So if you're in that area, check out that place. They've got all kinds of cool sculpting tools and materials. But if not, I mean, these are really easy to find. And that's a small rake tool from Glyptic Modeling Tools. Glyptic Modeling Tools are what I use the most, and you can get those from Sculpture House. It's a website, sculpturehouse.com, I believe it is. They've got this clay that I'm using, which is JMAC Classic Clay. It's basically like Chavant, but not Chavant, I guess. But it's the same type of thing. It's an oil-based modeling clay, and they've got the tools there. They've got everything. Sculpture, armatures, stands. They're just an awesome place. So yeah, more scratching there on the outer edge of the ear. And what I have as reference here is I took a picture of the other ear, the other side that I already sculpted, and off to the side I did a reverse image of it so I can use my own sculpture as reference and try to make it as close to that as possible and hit all the angles. And even though, like I said, it's not going to be perfect, it'll look pretty darn close and be very natural. Yeah, so you can see even at this point it looks a lot more worked out than it did at the beginning, and it's a process of just whittling away at it little by little. You're not removing a lot of material at once or adding a lot of material at once. It's very very small, almost imperceptible changes, but they all make a big difference. Just keep working, whittling away at it. So that little shape that I was working on right there, that's called the antihelix, and then the outer edge of the ear is called the helix. And I found that it's not really important to know all the anatomical names of the ear. As long as you know the shapes and how they interact with each other, that's really the most important thing. But for me, it helped me just kind of organize it in my brain just to put names on these different shapes. And then on the back of the ear, you want to make sure that you're considering some of the molding challenges that you might face here. So for example, this will be molded in UltraCal 30, which is like a plaster. So it's a hard stone mold. It won't flex at all. And I want to make sure that I don't sculpt the ear too thin so that the two halves of the UltraCal are almost touching with like an eighth of an inch of clay in between. That wouldn't be good, because also latex has to flow in there when I pour the latex in. So it's a careful line between making sure the ear looks normal, or I should say natural, but not too thin. And there is anatomy going on back there as well. The back of the ear has a cup shape, the way it comes out from the head, and then the outer edge of the ear, the helix, comes out from that cup shape and creates kind of like a lip on the outer edge there. So it's almost an illusion to make it look like it's as thin as an ear actually is. But if you were to measure it, it would probably be 2 or 3 times as thick as a normal ear, because like I said, you want to have room for the latex to flow in between your mold. So one of the things that inspired me to put a lot of effort into learning how to sculpt ears was my sculpture professor in college talked a lot about ears, and he mentioned one day that you can tell a lot about a sculptor just by looking at the ears and how they sculpt ears. And that really resonated with me, and then it was reinforced again a couple years after that when one of my sculpting and mask making heroes, Jordy Shell, mentioned on something I was watching that one of the first things he looks at when he looks at someone's sculpture is how they did the ears, and he can tell, you know, like how serious they were and how much they studied by how they handled the ears. So again, you know, it really hit home, and I thought, well, I better get good at ears. So that was just a lot of practice and you know, taking like a life cast and then taking some clay and then trying to copy that life cast. You know, do that a few times and you'll learn a lot, and do it with you know, even if you just do it with pictures too, that'll get you a lot farther than trying to make it up, that's for sure. Now, this sculpture is pretty far along, but it's nowhere near finished. I still need to go in and refine little areas like the around the nostrils and even the eyelids a little bit, and the forehead. There's still just a few areas, the lips, where I'm gonna work on it quite a bit more, and then I'll go in with some really light superficial wrinkles before I kind of polish it off and do the texture, and then, you know, the texture will be the last thing that I do. And you'll notice on the ear, it's getting pretty close. It's almost to the point where I'm mostly happy with it, and then the last step is I'll put this fluid on it that will kind of cut down the surface and smooth out all those rake marks, and that's something I'll pretty much do on the rest of the whole sculpture. So here it goes. This is called terpenoid. It's a solvent that's commonly used in painting. It's like a version of turpentine, I think, except it doesn't smell like anything, which is nice, because if you've ever used turpentine before, you'll know it smells like brain damage. And this stuff is odorless, but it does the job of dissolving that top layer of clay and removing all those scratch marks, and it really smooths everything out. And of course, the action of the bristles from the brush rubbing across the clay, they kind of act like little polishers. And what I'm doing here is just holding my hand up so I don't flick that stuff all over the place, because it's like a sticky, slimy goo, and you know, it'll get on everything, and you can't just wipe it off. You have to like clean it off with more terpenoid or some rubbing alcohol. So I'm going in and smoothing out all these little areas, and this is something that you would do if you were using water-based clay or wet clay. You would just do this with water, and it's a pretty common technique that, you know, even if you're watching this video, you probably already know to do this. But yeah, you can do it on oil-based clay, just about the same with this terpenoid stuff. Terpenoid is really easy to get. You can get it at Hobby Lobby or Michael's. Actually, Michael's is where I get it. They sell it in all different sizes. It's a little bit expensive. I buy it in a gallon size, and a gallon is I think it's like almost $55 for a gallon, which sounds like a hell of a lot of money for a gallon of anything. But use your 40% off coupon, and you know, it's definitely more economical than buying the smaller sizes, because you can get it in these little bottles, and those are definitely overpriced. So to get the slime off and start to do the final polish here, I just spray it with rubbing alcohol, and this is like a 91% rubbing alcohol, and what it does is kind of washes away all that gooey, slimy stuff and gives it a nice final polish, and you'll see it starting to look kind of shiny. Now that's not how I leave it. I'll eventually go in and do some texture over the ear, and then of course there's the water, and I put some water on it, and that does a similar thing to the rubbing alcohol, except it's even a finer polished, but what the water does is it allows the bristles to drag on the clay a little bit more, because the alcohol dissolves the clay a tiny bit, so it still makes it slippery. The water does not dissolve it, so the water just allows for the bristles to brush across it, and with a little more friction, and give it a little more of a polish. Yeah, so that's pretty close to the finished ear. And then what will happen is, when you get rid of all those tool marks and rake marks, it'll reveal things that you may not have seen before. Like this right here, I had kind of like a weird little line in there, so I went in with the tool again and then just smoothed it back out. And once you're done with all this wet stuff and all the brushing, the liquids, alcohol, the turpenoid, and the water and all that, you can just let it set for a while. Overnight is usually what I do. Let it set, and it'll dry back to the original form. To the original state of the clay. So I'm going back in here with my spatula tool and fixing another little area. And then after this video, I actually went in and did that a couple more times, and I hit a couple areas to get rid of some harsh lines and things like that. Alright, so I'm nearing the final little bits here, final little polishing, cleaning up some of the excess liquid in there, just brushing it out, kind of flicking it out from the inside of the ear. A few final checks against the other side. I even kind of wipe down the cheek a little bit there, and the back of the head, just get all that. And then there's a side-by-side comparison. That's the left and the right ear side-by-side. As you can see, they look pretty close to the same. So thank you for watching, and happy sculpting.